Greetings from Ann Arbor, Michigan, a great state and a great place of the great USA. Welcome to our podcast series, and I am promising you that this series is going to be very enlightening, very inspirational, a lot of fun, and something that will really, I think, help you as you walk your path to holiness. This series is going to have a lot of different things that you probably have questions about, but maybe have the opportunity to ask, especially about religious life. Like, what do they do all day? Who are they? Where do they come from? What's it like when a young woman enters religious life? So stay tuned as we will discuss where sisters come from today. Welcome to our Lumen Ecclesiae Digital, or as we like to say, our LE Digital. And today we have with us a special guest for our series on The Truth Will Set You Free, Sister Maria Gemma Martek. And Sister has been the director of education for our community for a number of years. And so today it's a great privilege, Sister, to have you join us. And why don't you tell us what that particular role in our community actually involves?
Happy to. Well, as you know, Dominican life study is integral to Dominican life. So to have a formal sister who is formally charged with director of education to be able to watch over the sister's education and progress towards degrees and certification as teachers, we all have to be certified. So to have that role has been a true blessing to be able to, with study being so integral to our life as Dominicans, to be able to contemplate and then to give to others the fruits of our contemplation. The vehicle by which we do that is by study. So when we talk about study, we're not talking about just study for study's sake, but studies for in service of the gospel. So being able to receive the word and then to preach it and proclaim it, we have to be on the forefront of knowledge and be able to study and to store up those sacred stores that we're able to give it out to a thirsty world.
Now, I think that's beautiful that Sister referred to this responsibility as a blessing. Mm-hmm. Personally, for my temperament, I would find all that organization and nitty-gritty difficult. Do you not find that difficult?
Well, I'd say it takes a good level of detail orientation that I have to pray for, definitely. But to be able to, but what's wonderful is to see, the amazing thing is when, as a vocation director, you know that when sisters come in, most of them don't come in as ready-made teachers. So very few, in fact. So when we come in, whatever educational background we have, to be able to look within that sister's educational background that she brings to us when she enters the convent, if she had some post-high school studies in her backpack, so to speak, when she comes in, to be able to determine how best to send her, what are her talents, her proclivities, and what would be best suited for her studying, to be able to bring God's word to a thirsty land. So it does take a good bit of organization. I rely on Excel spreadsheets quite a bit.
I'm sure you do.
And just to watch over the progression towards degrees of the sisters, and to see them graduate and to see them launch into the apostolate is probably one of the greatest blessings of the job. But also to hear them just so excited when they come home from school. They have a great class. They're learning a lot. Then as we're able to touch the professors that are on campus or the other students where they study, it's really amazing to be able to then see the fruits that come from it, and then to watch them blossom and grow in their apostolic life has been just a wonderful, wonderful gift. And then also later on for them to go on for advanced studies and graduate programs. So.
Okay, Sister, all the Dominicans would love the fact, I do believe, that we chose the title for this, The Truth Will Set You Free, since, as we were speaking on a previous podcast, that the Dominican motto is Veritas, and therefore it is truth. And so our sisters and their apostolate, when we go out to bring the truth to the world, how important that really is that our sisters are professional, that our sisters are ready to give the best to every single student and every single person on the street, so to speak, to the families, which we also mentioned in an earlier podcast. But one thing I wanted to ask you, which I'm sure our viewers are very curious about, is how do you and how does the individual decide what particular subject material they're going to study to get these professional degrees, or what level they're going to study? How are some of those determinations made? Because these girls out here, you see, that really are interested in entering, many times they're a little bit nervous about the academic level that Dominicans need. And so, Sister, how do you deal with that, considering we do get all kinds, and that's the beauty of our community. We have such a wide variety and so much complementarity that you don't realize that when you enter. And yet they come to you, and now it's time. They've been through their novitiate, and now it's time to get back into college for these professional degrees. So how are those decisions made?
Well, what's beautiful about it is sometimes the community and the superior will see something in a sister that she doesn't necessarily see in herself. So sometimes we might be asking a sister to stretch her capacities a little bit more.
Stretching is good.
Stretching is good for us. It is, and I think that's the beautiful spirit of our community. I was attracted to, 20 years ago when I was coming to visit, of just that being on the edge of our seats, wanting to be where God wanted us, where He needs us in the church and in the world today. And so it's funny. I remember meeting someone along the way, and who's a Dominican friar, and we were sort of talking about our, always having this love of study that was sort of put into us by the Lord from an early age. And he said, I was so excited to find out that when I met the Dominican order, that there was this order that was preaching and teaching and devoted on not just contemplation of the Word of God and love for the Eucharist and the Blessed Mother, but also study, that was an integral part. And he said, I just thought I was a geek for all these years, but really I was a Dominican, and just to, to have that and to realize that, I think that resonates with a lot of our sisters, of having that love of study in no matter what area. But as I mentioned before, very few of the sisters come as ready-made teachers. And that, I think that's often kind of a preconceived notion that most people have, like, okay, so everybody went through an education degree and then they entered the convent. But in reality, what we might come in with, I did my undergraduate in political science and Soviet studies, and went to graduate school for Russian and Soviet studies, and kind of one of the most unlikely paths you would have coming into the convent. But we have had sisters with electrical engineering backgrounds, aerospace engineering, math, physics, science, nursing. We have a couple of nurses in the community, your sister, as a matter of fact. So what's amazing is that God uses everything that a young woman brings into the community, as you know, to be able to be a gift for not just the community, but for God's people and the people to whom she's going to be sent. So what happens when a young lady enters and she presents the transcripts that if she's had any college experience, or even if she's just come out of high school, we'll kind of look at it, and when we're coming up on that, in fact, we just recently determined what our novices who are going to be newly professed this summer, what degrees they'll be working towards first for their undergraduate or post-baccalaureate
After
teaching.
this, you can tell me what degrees.
Okay, I will. So we kind of look at that sister's transcript and say, okay, she has done really well in math, and she has a lot of math. So we can put her math experience into use and probably send her either secondary or elementary math. Does she have a science background? Can we put her into a science curriculum? Those who come out of high school, we might ask them what they were most excited about, but depending on the needs of the community, we may need down the road more biology teachers, or more math teachers, or more social studies teachers, or whatever the case may be, or more secondary or more elementary. And so I have the privilege of being able to sit down with Mother and looking at those future needs of the community and what the requests are coming in from all of the schools where we teach, to be able to say, okay, we could use a few more with degrees in English or whatever. So we kind of look at what a young woman brings to us, what her talents and gifts are,
Exactly.
and where we think she might be able to go. And then, so that's sort of the first step. But, as you said, we have to be professionals. Gone are the days when when a young woman entered in the 40s or 50s and entered as a postulant and went right back out to the classroom.
That's right.
So we have to get those initial degrees, and then as we go forward, then we decide, what would be best for a graduate degree. Would it be better for her to go on, like you did, science as a graduate program? Others will go into maybe do engineering, or we had one of our sisters, Sister Mary Elizabeth, who had come from the electrical engineering doctoral program at the University of Michigan. And, Mother had sent her for her post-bac teaching certification, and then afterwards said, what do you think about trying to get back into that PhD program? And so we sent her, as you know, to complete her PhD in electrical engineering, and she was working with that professor that was doing the cochlear implants. So having an impact on society and the world, and now she's teaching science at the high school level. So it's kind of funny when we start a new mission and the administrators find out the educational experience that the sisters are bringing in with them, and they think, wow,
I know. That's
we've got
very
a
true.
PhD, an MS, and a BS all wrapped up into one, and a teaching certification. And so you would, to talk to the sisters, you'd never even know. There's a great, since we have such a love for study and it's so integral to our life, it's not really a source of pride, I think, for most of us. Would you? I would say I really notice it's really like sometimes it's crucifixion at the desk with the books, but
which is Thomas Aquinas, another Dominican, who nobody would have thought he would have said that, but we're in full agreement.
Yeah, but we love it. We love it, and it's so fun. And to know that we're not just sitting down with a book for knowledge's sake. It's because it's going to be in the service of God's people in some way, shape, or form down the road, and it enables us to be able to engage the culture. And I think of some of us in those programs where are a little bit off the beaten path, like say engineering or the hard sciences, and you think they're bringing Christ to everyone whom they meet in those programs that probably we would never touch. So,
Sister, you said very beautifully, and I really want to reiterate that to those involved in our podcast today, that our community is very blessed to have good benefactors who believe in our sisters' educational apostolate.
Amen.
And also, I give incredible credit to God, who is sending us very, very bright young women.
Yes.
But I also want to say to those listening that a young woman many times has not even considered teaching. I did not at all. Mm-hmm. And in a few minutes, Sister, I'm going to ask you to explain the degree that you received, because I entered, as I had said on another podcast, I entered right out of high school because I knew this was my vocation. The only hesitancy I would say that I really did have was I did not want to teach. And if you've heard my brief testimony of my growing up years, you would understand why that didn't really appeal to me. The medical world did appeal to me, which just is an innate interest, and I still hold that. However, a lot of young women will come to me and say, I love your community and I'm really interested because everything about it, as much as they can see, fits them, but they're nervous about teaching. Mm-hmm. And so I want to just say that's not a reason to enter or not to enter a particular community. It really is secondary to the spirituality, which again, we mentioned in a previous podcast.
Yeah.
But Sister, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you graduated with a degree in international studies and that you specialized in Russian studies, which again isn't your kind of run-of-the-mill type degree. So at what point did you really consider your vocation, and what did you do after your studies, and how has that proven to be God's plan in providence for you, which you never would have expected?
Well, I think what's funny, it's amazing how when you look at the stories of all the sisters, there are threads that go through each of them. You would always hear you hear the Eucharist, you hear Our Lady. Sometimes you hear study, sometimes you don't, or whatever. But then God works with us in individual ways, and to find that you have all of these sort of random experiences in your life that then the Lord pulls together, and they're gifts for His people and the community that you think you're just leaving them at the doorstop when you enter. And so I was, I guess, a little bit more non-traditional, you could say. I had no idea when I was a young girl that God was calling me to religious life, although I had a great burning love for him and his mother and his church. And the way it took form was being involved in the parish, being involved in choir, lecturing, you name it. And I've always loved study and enjoyed it. And when I was starting my undergraduate, I had an idea towards working in the Foreign Service. And then as that evolved, I thought maybe I wanted to be a college professor. But the thought of teaching at an elementary level scared me because I thought, to be responsible for all these little souls, if I goofed anything up, I would set them on...
They do survive us, believe me.
I would set them on this trajectory. But then I found out that's crazy because even in a school setting, you might touch a student, but you might not touch another student to the degree that another teacher is going to do it. And so God has that soul in his hands, and he lovingly places the people around that soul that will help that young man or young woman flourish and be nourished. And so when you have that trust, that ultimate trust in God, he definitely, it's his work and we're just participating in it. But I had no idea.
Did you enter right after your college?
I did not. I didn't even know I still had that burning desire in college, and I went for political science and Soviet studies and Russian language. And I thought, okay, whatever God wants me to do, I want to do whatever he wants me to do. So then I went on to graduate school and had the blessing of spending the better part of a year in Moscow on a research exchange with in foreign affairs and international relations. And when I came back, I was working for a company that was doing business in the former Soviet Union, and I loved it. I loved that I was doing good things for God's people, and I was praying that the Lord would give me the graces and the qualities that I would need to be a good wife and a good mother. But he was fashioning my heart for himself. And it wasn't really until a little bit after I had that position and then I worked in nonprofit resettling Russian refugees. It was during that period of time that I started to realize that the Lord had made my heart maybe a little bit bigger, and maybe he intended me to be just for him. And I started spending lots of time in the Eucharistic Adoration Chapel and going to daily Mass. There you go. And he blew my heart wide open when I opened it, when I opened my heart up to him. But it was funny because when I started discerning, I knew more, I guess, generally that I thought he might be calling me to his bride, but I didn't have a concrete sense of where. For some people, it might be they were taught by Dominicans or taught by Franciscans, and then they felt that affinity towards that community when they entered religious life. For me, I didn't really have any Dominicans in my life, but I realized now that my whole life going back, I was a Dominican. Loved study, loved the Blessed Mother, loved the Holy Eucharist, loved the church, wanted to be kind of wherever God needed me to be.
We just have a little bit of it all, don't we?
We do.
I know,
it's good.
I agree.
God uses everything. But then to be able to spend that time in silence and quiet with him in adoration and say, okay, I think you made me to be yours. And when I came here and I met you, I met the community, I knew this was home. And then to bring that and say, okay, I've got this backpack full of really interesting studies that I don't know where it's going to go. So eventually when I went for my degree program, I ended up being certified for elementary with social studies. So the Russian thing always comes out in something for me, whether it be,
That's true.
The prayer,
I have
icons.
to add a tidbit. I had actually caught Sister Maria Gemma meditating out of a Cyrillic written Bible before.
Yeah.
Nobody else in the community asked to borrow her Bible for
Try
that
to keep
reason.
the brain from being too rusty,
Sister,
but I enjoy
let's
it.
kind of sum it up. One of the questions I'm sure our viewers are wondering is, for higher education in particular, where do we send our sisters?
Well, we have our House of Studies established right now here at our mother house in Ann Arbor. So after a young woman makes first vows, she would start her degree program at Eastern Michigan University, which is a secular college, which actually is kind of a blessing because we have a great witness opportunity on those campuses. Really, a really beautiful story. We had a math professor who had been in the process of converting and then kind of left it, got married, had kids, and the Lord had been working on her and saying, okay, and she said, Lord, if you really want me to be a Catholic, you're going to have to do some really amazing, incredible sign that I'm not going to miss. And so she walked into her classroom on the first day of classes, and there were 10 of our beautiful smiling sisters sitting in the classroom. And she went home and she said, "Okay, Lord, I got it." And she called,
pretty big sign.
She called the local parish and got
over.
herself and her kids into RCIA and RCIC, and she became a Catholic that Easter. And so, but even in less dramatic ways, just the thoughtfulness that we bring into the classroom, the love that we bring to the children, because we go to a secular university for our teaching degrees. That means we student teach in a public school or sometimes in a Catholic school if we have trouble getting placed into a public school. But even being able to touch those souls is such an incredible
And is there
opportunity.
any problem with wearing the habit, since that is what we wear all the time?
No, we wear the habit to into the classroom, and little children will come up and say, "Oh, I know who this is. This is Jesus." Or some children will say, "Who is that?" And we have the opportunity to say, "This is Jesus." So without we're evangelizing just by our presence and by our love. But there was one young sister who was doing her student teaching in a third grade classroom in a public school, and one of her little guys in the class was homeless and had just terrible behavior problems. Nobody was able to get him to mind or be on task with his work. And she was the only one who was able to do it because somehow intuitively, he knew that she was there for him.
Oh, beautiful.
And her love, her spiritual maternity, she held him to a higher standard, and she was able to call him out of the chaos that his life was, and to be able to really focus on his study. And we would have never had the opportunity to touch that soul had we not gone to a secular university. So we go to Eastern Michigan here in Ann Arbor, but also we have the opportunity and the great blessing to be studying at the Catholic University of America for graduate studies in either getting a master's in teaching or philosophy. So we have that ability, and the president of Catholic U has been so good to the sisters, and so they're on campus, sort of part of the campus ministry team, but then they're also getting scholarships. And I should say, we are so grateful to our benefactors who enable us to be able to get the degrees that we need in order to bring God's word out to his children. But we also do try to avail ourselves of scholarships whenever we possibly can.
That's for
so
sure.
we do. So we have cycles we need to get all the letters in, all the requests in. So our sisters, because they are very academically motivated and do bring a higher caliber to the courses that they take, we are able to get scholarships. And it's amazing. The Eastern Michigan has this database. So if you were a farmer who grew up in Indiana, there might be a little scholarship for you.
We'll take it.
We kind of try to take all that we can in order to be able, because being
Definitely.
stewards of what we're given, if we're able to on our merit get scholarships, we try to do that as well.
And let's remember, too, that we just had a sister defend her thesis and
We
get her
do.
PhD, was awarded
do.
her PhD from Catholic University in cellular biology, which is something that interests me amazingly.
Yeah,
And we have
it's
another
amazing.
sister studying now to get her PhD in theology, and one finishing her thesis for her PhD in English from Catholic University of
So
America.
those higher degrees are definitely, for some sisters,
So these
part of the plan.
Dominicans, I guess we really do take very seriously our role in the church to preach and teach truth.
We do.
So we want to really thank you. Thank you, Sister Maria Gemma.
Thank you
It's
for
been a
asking me to
delight
come.
to have you here. And I know our audience loves you very, very much, as we certainly do. And keep us in your prayers. And thank you again. We do have a lot of young sisters that need a lot of education. And so we really do thank you for believing in us and supporting us and praying for us, as we certainly do you. God bless you all.
Thank you. God bless.
So if you like the material on this particular podcast, then please click on the next podcast for another fascinating story.